Right. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Sorry we're a couple of minutes late. My fault. Wi-Fi and thunderstorms. So welcome to Raptor, and welcome Helen Macdonald. Thank you very much for joining
Hello,
us.
this is a real honor. It's so nice to see your face, Jimmy. I just want to say to everyone, there may be moments in this chat in which this thing appears. This is my parrot, who is a sweetheart, but is also a bit of an attention seeker. So if I start sort of, just don't worry about the parrot, he's fine.
I love the parrot. He can. Maybe I need to do one with the parrot as well.
People always say to me, see, there we go. Look, this is a classic. People always say to me, is it not? It really, because they're really cuddly creatures, and people say, is it, after all these years with birds of prey, is it like not emotionally more healthy to have a parrot because they're cuddly? And I'm always like start laughing and say, like, I've got more scars from that parrot than I've had from any raptor I've ever handled. Like, he's vengeful. So yeah, they're a handful.
Well, I used to work in a collection, an animal collection, and they had a parrot, a cockatoo called Harvey, and I was terrified of him. And like you say, I've handled some of the biggest eagles you can, but that beak, I was like, boy, oh, no way.
No.
Anyway. So yeah, and there we go, parrots. Well, thank you for joining us anyway, Helen. I really appreciate it. So I always start with this in the same way and getting people to go right back to the beginning and talk about what got them into not just birds of prey but nature. What was, if there was a defining moment or several defining moments through your childhood or older years, and just go from there. Basically, roll with it. What was the defining moment?
I was just a nature nut.
Or who?
A nature nut very, very early on. I had my dad passed away, but he was a photographer and a wonderfully slightly spectrumy man. He was a really good photographer and he was into aeroplanes. And I think that my bird obsession may have been a bit like a kind of, sort of hand-me-down, because he was always looking up, we'd go out with the binoculars and we'd always look up at things. And he had this amazing collection of books, lots and lots of field guides. And they were my favorite books when I was a kid. I used to just sit there and learn spiders, In fact, I used to keep my Collins book. It was in the bathroom. I used to sit on the loo and learn my birds. I can't believe I just said that. But we lived in this really weird place in Camberley in Surrey. It was like a kind of old country estate in the middle of town that was owned by this 19th century weird spiritual society called the Theosophical Society. We weren't theosophists, we were a bunch of atheists, but we were surrounded by these very eccentric, mostly old ladies. And it was a really safe place. And I used to just run off when I was a kid into this environment, and I spent so much time just becoming a naturalist. I used to sort of lounge around in the meadow. I used to climb trees. I used to come home with grass snakes. Mum's like, Helen, I can smell it, because they have this horrible defensive smell, and I come in with it and they're take the snake away. And of course, as soon as you get into being known as someone who likes wildlife, people bring you orphan birds to rear. So I remember one year I reared a nest of baby bullfinches that someone had cut their tree down, and at one point there was an orphan badger cub. I mean, I really was something out of a storybook. But it's always been there, Jimmy. It's just totally part of who I am. I've always thought of myself, I've been a writer, I've been a historian, but most of all, I'm a naturalist. And of course, birds of prey early on were the things. All my mates had, pictures of Bay City rollers on their bedroom walls, and I had sort of posters of short-tailed eagles. So yeah, I always wanted to be a falconer. And when I used to go down to this place called the Hawk Conservancy in Andover, which was one of the very early falconry centres, and I was a total and utter pain in the ass. I used to bother them. I used to help clean aviaries out, do all the things. And when I was, I think 12 or 13, they decided I knew enough that I could have my first bird. And I got, she was a kestrel called Amy, and she'd been kept in a parrot cage by someone who was clearly an idiot. And that was it. I flew every day, kept her for years, and that was how I got into falconry.
How did you enjoy it at the Hawk Conservancy? I have to ask you that because I know I got really well with Ashley Smith. I have tried to get but obviously his allegiances still lie with the Hawk Conservancy, and I know they've been doing stuff during lockdown, and he's been doing talks about the history, which have been lovely. So I love the Hawk Conservancy, and all the team are so nice that are there. But Ash Smith and Tracy are wonderful people. So
Yeah, really.
how did you enjoy it at the Hawk Conservancy then?
Oh, I can't. I mean, I just look back on it, and it was, I don't know how my parents put up with it. They used to, put me on the train in the morning, come and get me in the evening, and that was it every weekend. They used to sort of, drag themselves around Andover waiting for me. I mean, they were the most amazingly patient parents. It was great. Looking back on it, I think I was quite a weird kid. I just didn't fit in at school at all. I didn't fit in, didn't really have many friends. I was bullied quite a lot. I was the weird bird person. So it was like a really great place to go, not only to hang out with the birds, which was basically the main reason I wanted to go, but to be with people who loved the same things that I did. And that was a really special thing for me then, just to feel that I wasn't alone in this passion. And that's still, looking back on it, I really treasure that.
Oh, nice, good. So when did that blossom into this desire to get your own bird, like rather than one at the Hawk Conservancy Trust? When did that occur? Did that occur before sort of H's for Hawk developed, or?
I always wanted my own birds. It's easy to kind of think about falconry and what, in particular, falconry, why it called me. I mean, partly it was a really obvious reason that I thought that raptors were the most beautiful things the world has ever made, and I still sort of think that. And I wanted to just hang around them. And I think there's an American falconer, I can't remember who it was, a long time ago, said that, if you're into birds of prey, falconry is the ultimate. It's the ultimate relationship with them, because, as you know, Jimmy, if you do it right, what you're seeing is in principle exactly what a wild bird is doing, only you get to see it right there.
Yeah.
So there was always that. I was a little bit kind of charmed by the whole kind of ridiculous romance of falconry too, there was something about the kind of medievalism, and then there was a kind of a slightly more dubious, I kind of loved all those kind of stuffy Victorian people in tweed, I'm not so much into that now. And I think there was another reason, and this is kind of a bit cod psychology, but I was a twin. I had a twin brother who died just after we were born. And even when I was really small, I was always looking for something that was missing, my other half. And I think falconry fed into that. There's something about having this wild creature who, by its nature, is, it's not a cuddly, it doesn't run to you like a dog. Be with me, love me, love me. And then you let it go, and it comes back, and it comes back, and it comes back because of the bond you've built. And I think there's something about that, that movement that spoke to me about this early loss and how it might somehow be salved or retrieved. And I do think it's partly that for me. Yeah, it's that early loss.
I mean, it is. It's hard to explain. I mean, I've stepped away from the captive bird of prey thing for, well, it's been a few years now. But it is hard to explain that the manning process, when you sat there and you've got this bird that's hanging upside down and batshit crazy, really, and then eventually it grabs onto your glove and you feel that, and then when you get to that moment where it starts to take its eyes off you and feed off the fist, or it closes its eye and goes to, and it's just you and the bird. It's just I've done this time and time, sat in my mum's utility room, and she slowly opened the door, and the bird had bait, and I'd curse her.
I know, yeah.
And it's that, and then you get it back again. And you sit there in the pitch black, and what my parents must have thought. Their little son sat in the dark in the utility room with a Harris Hawk or whatever it is. Yeah, and it's hard to explain that, and that's why.
Yeah, it's like a kind of meditation. I think. I mean, there's a kind of state of mind that you go into where you kind of turn invisible, and it's not like any other kind of way of being that I know, and it's always really special. I always think of Steve Bodio's kind of definition of falconry, this American falconer and writer, and he says, falconry is the art of being very polite to a bird. And I think that really, in many ways, captures it for me.
Oh, brilliant. Good. So, obviously, we're going to have to talk about the book. But before we talk about the book, H's for Hawk, there was another book before that, Falcon. I've got a copy of it in here because I was reading it I was picking through it, I think, actually for historical reasons, because I mean the cultural aspect fascinates me between humans and birds of prey. So I don't know where it is. I haven't got it here. Sorry.
Don't worry, I'm going to ask you to show it to me, Jimmy.
Well, I have been doing that though. I've been holding a book up, so I feel like a fraud now with you. So I don't know where it is. And annoyingly, I did find a copy because it was part of a range of books. Was it Reaktion?
Reaktion were published in London. They had a whole series of books on different animals, and I think that book was really interesting for me because it was a real gateway drug. So I basically what happened is I can I go back a bit? I don't want to destroy the narrative. So I wanted to be a naturalist. Obviously, I wanted to be a biologist, but I have the worst math skills of anyone I know. I can't even add up a list of figures. And that obviously is a problem. I would have been a great 19th century naturalist. Obviously, if I'd been very rich and lived in the 19th century and been a man, that's probably not going to work. But anyway, basically, I couldn't do it because I didn't have the maths. So I did an English degree. And then after my English degree, we might talk about that a bit. I went off and worked in raptor conservation and raptor breeding. And I worked a bit in the Middle East. And I kept seeing all these conservation initiatives fail because no one that was trying to implement them was paying much attention to the really deep cultural importance of falcons in that culture and why they were being used and how they were being used. And I thought, this is really interesting. Why does no one work on the cultural aspects of animals? So I went back to university and I worked and I did a master's degree in the history and philosophy of science, and then started a PhD. And I got so into this subject. It's fascinating. It's really the thing that really, more than anything else now, I think drives me. And but as I was doing this PhD, I kept finding all these stories and anecdotes that didn't fit in it. And I ended up writing this book. And as I was writing it, I realized this other thing, and that was that there are all these brilliant ideas in the university, all these research ideas, these analytical ideas. And no one was ever reading them apart from the people in universities. And I thought, that's really not on. So I think that was the moment I realized, not only as I was writing that book, that it wasn't going to be totally academic, but I wanted to write for everybody. I just thought it wasn't fair that the university kind of just keeps all this stuff to itself. And that was the beginning of the end, really, for me at university.
Did you complete the PhD? This is
no, I never finished it. No,
that's all right. Okay, fine. Do you know what? That's really refreshing to hear, because I'm just, without swinging it back to me, but I'm going to. I'm just about to start a PhD, potentially about to, but on the basis that I didn't want it to be just something that the university, the university had hold of it, and then that was it. And so I'm looking at something that anyone, it's going to benefit more than just the university. And sorry, I haven't really mentioned it.
No, I think once we finish talking, I want to hear all about this.
Okay, I'll tell you because no one else will be interested in it. That was really refreshing to hear that from you. That's made me feel a little bit better about what I'm.
It was really weird. There was this point, and it was one of those lessons in life when you realise that sometimes realizing that you don't want to do something is just as important as realizing that you do want to do something. And it was a real weight off my mind when I decided to just put that down.
So how did you land that book then? How did that come about? Because I was just about to make a joke, and this is God's honest truth. I was looking for the Falcon book. I can't find it. It's in here somewhere. But I found the guinea pig one because my wife is obsessed with guinea pigs and rabbits.
That's cool.
But that wouldn't have had the same effect. But yeah. There you go. How did you come about to be the person that wrote about falcons, just like the person who wrote about guinea pigs and so on?
Well, I think the saddest thing about the way the publishing industry works, and it doesn't always work like this, but it has traditionally worked like this, is who you know. And I was sitting in a university cafe in the library, and I knew this guy vaguely who was the editor of this series, and he knew I was into falconry, and he was looking for writers, and he sat down and said, I'm doing this series. We're doing different animals and we're doing their cultural history. Do you know anything about the cultural history of falcons? And I was just like, do I know about the culture? I mean, it's all I bloody knew about. So I said yes. And I got this tiny advance and wrote this book. And I love the illustrations in it. I think that's the best thing about that book. The illustrations are really awesome. It's really, really, really pretty. It's full of pictures.
Yeah.
And that was the first kind of, book that went out there. It got a tiny review in the Times. It's very exciting, like this big. And I'm a writer now. So At the time, Sorry.
I'm just saying I'm actually rewinding. I've jumped the gun here by going into the books, but yeah, talk about university because you went to Cambridge.
Yeah.
That's right. Tell us a bit about university. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I was a state school kid. I went to the local comprehensive, and yeah, I mean, I went to this women's college that wasn't very high up in the women's college, in the Cambridge University college tables, but it was the only one that anyone from my school had ever got into. So I ended up going there, and I had quite a bad time there. Actually, I felt really alienated because it was, I mean, it still is full of very, very posh people who knew a lot about life and stuff, and I knew nothing, and I spent a lot of time not doing any work. I'm quite embarrassed missing this. So, I mean, I got in quite a lot of trouble a few times because I just wouldn't write essays, but I was reading all the time. I read and read and read and read. And there was a lot of kind of late night coffee and, stressing out. But I got the degree, and then I realized that what I wanted to do was work in falconry, because that's what you do after an English degree, Jimmy. You go and work in falconry. So I went down to Wales and worked for a person that we both know in Wales, Dr. Nick Fox, and I was working both in the office there, helping with conservation research projects on falcons used and affected by Arab falconry, and also running a whole load of imprint falcons for AI. So yes, half my life was typing, and the other half was having falcons mate with my head.
Why not? There you go.
It happens.
This is, yeah. Whatever pays the bills.
I mean, I don't know if your viewers listen, but there's a way of making of breeding falcons. It is. I don't know if you talked about it before. You may have done on this.
I don't think we've covered artificial insemination. But you can go there.
So basically, if you can breed birds of prey by putting two in a pen together, and they kind of pair up or they don't pair up. And actually, it's really interesting. There are a lot of pairs, natural pairs at this place, and some of them never got on. And we had this one pair that was so in love. I've never seen anything like it. They were inseparable, and they were a pair of sakers, and they used to sit next to each other and preen each other all day. They were completely in love. And I think that was when I realized that, birds have feelings. They really, it's not just, they do have sentiments, and they can fall in love. So anyway, yeah, if you take a young bird and you rear it from an egg, from a chick, and eventually it grows up, but it starts to think of itself as this sort of being which is kind of finds humans kind of sexy, and what you do is you spend a lot of time with this bird, and you kind of court it. You give it gifts of food, and this all seemed very reasonable and normal when I was there, and then eventually at breeding season, you're kind of bowing and calling to it. I can do very good impersonations of most falcon species these days. I haven't for a while, but anyway. And then you put on this. Oh God, it's so embarrassing. You put on this latex hat with little kind of dints in it, like a bit like a kind of like, if you imagine pressing a pencil into sort of plastic, you've got these dints.
They're like a honeycomb, aren't they? It's a honeycomb sort of, yeah.
And you basically do your best kind of like seductive kind of routine with a male falcon, and it will leap on your head, and it will copulate with it, and then you collect the sperm with a syringe, and then you check its quality under a microscope, and then you use that to inseminate a female falcon who is also in love with you. I mean, it's like some weird messed up interspecies Lothario. And it was like, it became really normal. I remember sitting with one of my colleagues in a motorway service station once, a guy, and we were discussing sperm quality, and and I looked around, and everyone on the other tables was looking kind of not only horrified but faintly sympathetic, like they clearly thought we were trying to have a kid. And so yeah, it was interesting.
What did was you actually still had the hat on as well?
No, I was very dressed at that point. Yeah. Deer falcons, and I mean, it was like living in a candy shop for me. I mean, it was just birds. It was wonderful. Yeah.
So, okay, I mean, that must have been an incredible experience. Again, one of my favourite books for raptors, birds of prey in captivity is Nick Fox's Understanding Birds of Prey is a fantastic book.
Really
so yeah, that's
it's very good. Sorry.
No, it's all right. So Cambridge, and then did you know at what point did you think, I want to write, because you've just said obviously that you didn't like writing essays, and
no, it's not that I didn't like writing essays. I just didn't like. I respond really badly to authority. I'm like the world's worst employee. So basically, if someone tells me to do something, I will do anything not to do it, which is why writing is quite a good career for me, because I generally, I'm working on my own. And so, yeah, I wasn't happy and I kicked against the system, basically.
Fair enough.
But there's a difference writing stuff that you want to write because you want to tell people things to writing an essay. One's just an exercise and one is like, look at this cool stuff. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's what I like doing. So
when did that come? Was it a light bulb moment, or was it something I kind of, you're doing the falconry, you're working for Nick Fox, and you're involved with other aspects of it? Was it a light bulb moment, or was it you knew that you were actually going to?
It was one of the most heartbreaking moments of my life, actually, Jimmy. In fact, it was at the falconry centre that we used to work.
Yeah.
Park.
Oh yeah, the dogs are okay on. Let me go and move the dog.
No, I'll just keep talking. So one of the things that we used to do at this falconry centre was take people out on falconry experience days, and I used to, we used to load up this vehicle, and these nice people that from all over the the place, and they'd come along and they'd go out onto the in the vineyards. You remember it all, Jimmy? You'd go out.
Yeah.
And it was a really spectacular spring day. There were these huge fluffy cumulus clouds. There were massive kind of thermals, and we were lying on this bank looking over this valley. And these Harris hawks are on the soar. They're soaring above us, and it's just fantastic. I mean, it's like and it's so beautiful that all the people that are with the group are just lying next to me, just lounging, watching these birds. And I'm sitting there thinking, I am so bored. It was this moment, and it was like, I love this, but my brain is turned to cold porridge. I need to go back to university and do something with my brain. And as I was thinking this terribly, this awful kind of thought, I turned around, and the guy next to me who worked at a bank somewhere in Leicestershire, I realized he was crying, and he turned to me and he said, I envy you. He said, I have hated my job my whole life, he said, and you do this. You are the luckiest person in the world.
Oh, no.
I felt so bad. I was like, oh no. I mean, it was amazing, but I felt bad. Yeah. I was like, yes, it is. So
did you go back to university then?
Yeah, university then, yeah.
Okay. And then that was where the star was born. That's what
Yeah. So of course I didn't have a hawk when initially I did actually. I flew a Merlin one year when I went back. That was really fun, because I don't know if your listeners or viewers know the season for flying Merlins is fairly short. It's kind of over the summer holidays. So I flew Merlins. I love Merlins. They're my favorite, I think, to fly. They're like little heat-seeking missiles that are also unaccountably very cute. And so that was great. And then this thing happened. I was a few years into this PhD, and I got this research fellowship at a college, and everything was kind of fine. Only I knew I wasn't going to finish this thing. And then my dad died very suddenly of a heart attack, and it was grim. He was not only a great dad, but he was my friend. He was a really close sort of friend of mine, which is, I think, quite unusual. I'm quite lucky, I think, to have had that. And it was really sudden. He was out taking photographs in London on a really stormy night and just keeled over. And none of us even knew he'd been even slightly ill. And my world kind of blew away, and I kind of went into shock. And, I had this college house, and I went back and tried to sort of work and do a bit of teaching. And it was really strange, Jimmy. All I dreamt about for a long time was goshawks. And there was this one goshawk that I dreamt about, and it was one that was from the centre we both worked at. I don't remember whether you were there that day. I think you might have been. Someone had been walking in the woods, some member of the public with their dog, and they'd found this bird under a tree. It was on its back like this. And they were like, oh, it's like an eagle or something or whatever. And they picked it up, and it blinked, it kind of moved, and they were like, oh my God, so they put it in a box and drove it up to this falconry centre. And we all sort of gathered in the front room, and the boss sort of put her hand in to get this bird out. And it was this huge old female goshawk. I mean, she was just so terrifying. She was like a thundercloud and a leopard. And she was this massively muscly thing. And all her feet were kind of gnarled. She was clearly really old. Yeah. And she was absolutely fine. She just knocked herself out, I think, when she was obviously after something and hit a tree. And we just took her outside and let her go. And there was this moment, Jimmy, where she went over a hedge like a rocket. And then somehow she just vanished. And it was like she'd found this kind of a rent in the air, like a split, and she just slipped through it.
Yeah.
And that moment I just kept dreaming about, and I realized that it was very important for me. I mean, obviously after you've lost someone very dear to you, you don't really think in a very sensible way, but I had this incredible intuition that what was going to get me through the next few months was training a goshawk. And I can see you laughing. I mean, so anyone that's watching this and doesn't know what a goshawk's like, I mean, basically they're the Christopher Walkens of the bird world. They're like these sort of murderous, highly strung, psychopathic creatures. Actually, I did a talk in Connecticut once at this library in Westport. And I said this because, trying to explain to people what a goshawk's like is quite hard. I used to try and use military aircraft metaphors, and no one knew what those were. So I say they're like Christopher Walken, and I give my little spiel, and usually everyone kind of finds that, vaguely amusing, but everyone was like stony faced. And I thought, no one in Connecticut in this town knows who Christopher Walken is. That's really odd. Anyways, I gave my talk, and at the end of it, all these people kept coming up and they kept saying, he lives here, right? He's a really nice man. He's not a psychopath at all. I was just really afraid of the entire place. I was like, no, I know, just the roles. So yeah, so I bought this goshawk. I bought a goshawk, and that was in many ways extremely dumb. But I don't recommend training a goshawk as a way of dealing with anything, really. It's not easy.
Yeah, well, I'm laughing because it takes me back to some of my first experiences with birds of prey, and actually I live not far down the road from him now. But one of the first people I ever went out with was a friend who flew goshawks, and he had a female goshawk, a big Finnish brute of a bird called Inga, and I got him access onto a farm. And he took me out one day, me, him, and a friend of his, and so basically she missed a pheasant, and this is just the result. I don't remember anything else from the day, but she missed a pheasant and went up into a tree. This will paint a picture to people who don't know goshawks as well. And she wouldn't come down. And this was the biggest field ever. And Dave's there. And in the end, he said, right, guys, you two are going to have to walk to the other side of the field and go and hide behind the hedge so she can't see you. Because that's... And we did. We had to go. And we're hiding behind the head watching Dave try and get this goshawk down. And eventually she came down. And I just thought, yeah, I'm not flying goshawks. I don't want this in my life.
One of the things, I just want to kind of delve into a bit of gender politics here, because there's a bit I talk about in the book that makes me laugh so much. They really are very temperamental, and if you don't get their kind of conditioning and weight, and you need to kind of get them into the mood to fly and all this sort of stuff. If you read all the 19th century books on falconry, written mostly by officer class, rather bluff men who have strong opinions on ladies. Ladies shouldn't be allowed near the hawks, it upsets them. You constantly read these articles about what goshawks are like, and it's hilarious. It's basically talking about like hormonal women. They'll bite your head off. They never listen to what you say. They're really moody. They'll ignore you. They go into fits of tempers and rage. It's never ever considered by these guys that it might have been something they've done. It's always these goshawks are completely inexplicable, and I just found this hilarious. It's just yeah. But they're interesting birds.
But yeah, that was an interesting experience. So obviously, yeah, this goshawk that you got, I don't know who's tuning in and who knows what about, and whether they've read H's for Hawks. So this obviously develops into this book that you wrote. How did that come about? Obviously you're an author now. Was that a conscious thing, or did you just start writing stuff down? And
yeah, it's a good question. So I used to keep diaries when I was a kid, and then I just stopped. And then when my dad died, I found myself writing something like a diary, like a journal. And I think it was, looking back on it, a way of kind of just writing the world back into existence. Everything was just like, after an explosion. And then when Mabel, my goshawk, appeared, obviously I wrote about her. And so I'd write a lot about what happened and how I was feeling, and my worries. There's a lot of stress. Falconry, it's not all, particularly with the goshawk, I stopped worrying about myself. I just worried about what I was doing with this bird. And it was a very strange year. I mean, I might talk a bit more about what happened in that season with her. But towards the end of it, I realized that what would happen was like it was a story that wasn't just about me. It was a much older story. It was a story about loss and about depression and about love and about death and about, you know, grief and all these things that are, you know, part of being a human. And I thought, I wonder if I should write this down as a story. And, you know, it took me 7 years to get around to it, because I think there are two kinds of book about grief. One of those kinds of books is the one you write in the middle of it, like a bit like a sort of battlefield diary, because you're nuts basically after you've lost someone. And then there are books that are written from a lot later looking back, because by then you've almost become a new person, and you can write about the person you were without it being too painful or, you know, embarrassing. So 7 years it took me to get around to sitting down and writing it. And then it took 1.5 years to write. And I'd sold it as a proposal to a publisher, so I knew that it was going to be published. And as I wrote, I just kept thinking, this book is terrible. No one's going to read it. It's so bad. It's so depressing. It's about a miserable woman, a dead author, and a bird. I mean, God. And I was wrong. I was completely wrong. So.
Yeah, you were completely wrong. You're right. Did obviously, well, you've answered one of my questions there in how you expected it to go. When was the moment then? I'm asking you obviously about a specific moment here. When was the moment when you realised, holy crap, people really like this book? Was it when you won the award, or when it? I don't know. When do you realise, wow, I've you know, this has struck a chord with people?
Yeah. Well, it was weird. So I think I was helped a little bit because the manuscript was late, as usual with my things. So the book came out a little bit later than it was supposed to, and it came out a really weird time of year for a new book. It came out at the end of July, which is the kind of traditionally the time when you don't release new books because everyone's on holiday. Yeah. And this meant that with some good reviews, it was like one of the only kind of new books knocking around, and people were starting to buy it. So I think the moment that I realized it might be a success was there was like a really, really big review of it in the Sunday Times, which clearly thought by an writer that clearly thought I was a total psycho, but really loved Mabel. And I was like, oh, and then, yeah, and then it kept winning awards. And the weird thing is, you know, I'm the sort of person that if I get a compliment, I'm like a slug when you pour salt on it. I'm really bad with compliments. So I was kind of numb. I felt really pleased for the book, as if it was like an animal, but I didn't really feel it was me, you know, because writing a book's a bit like making, like, I don't know, I think about being a potter or something. You make a pot and then you judge the pot. You don't judge your skill, you judge the pot. And I just think I used to just get pleased for the book, which, and then, you know, things happen, like I managed to, you know, afford a car that didn't break down every 4 miles, which was amazing. That was really good.
Brilliant. That's I mean, it's a wonderful book. It's weird how these things I remember I remember when I first met you at the centre we've mentioned, but I remember one day I was in believe it or not, I was in people won't believe this, but I was in the local running club, Newent Runners Club, and I was out running anyway, and someone said to me, who got no interest in birds of prey whatsoever, and this has happened 2 or 3 times now, and they've gone, have you read that book, H is for Hawk? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And, you know, obviously then I'd name drop and go, well, and they were like, we love it. We absolutely love it. And these are people, and they're like, we don't know anything about falconry or birds of prey, but they found it fascinating, and a whole host of emotions. So yeah, it's
having said that moment, you know, I think there was like someone who knew someone said that their dad, they were reading it in a book group at their father's golf club. And at that point I thought, shit, you know, this really must be something, because that doesn't sound like the kind of thing I write for. But yeah, so it was weird. It
nailed it. So yeah, brilliant. I'm just trying to think let's stick with the gossips for now. We'll mention your other book that's you've done. So obviously you wrote the book, it was very successful. I started seeing you in America on Instagram thinking, yeah, she's made it.
I had a baseball cap. I even had a baseball cap, and it was amazing.
So yeah, right. that came about. But then obviously there was I've got to talk about the BBC Two Natural World,
Yeah.
and you did with Mike Burkhead, a wonderful team. No, actually, Riwan, the first time you met a wild goshawk, let's talk about that. Do you remember that moment?
Which was that? I know this, but this is something I'm sorry, my brain is.
Well, there was a very handsome bearded chap who took you to a nest, so I hope you remember that moment. Do you remember meeting the goshawks with Mark Parker?
I do. I'm not supposed. I don't think I was supposed to be there. I think I kind of blanked that out. I don't know if I was supposed to come along. I think I kind of basically just like hitched myself to the wild.
No, you did. I think we did it for you. It was all arranged for Helen Macdonald.
It's amazing. So basically, we went to this forest. Which, location should remain secret.
Yeah.
And it's my first British wild goshawk was what it was.
Sorry,
yeah. So basically, we went into this wood, and it was kind of like the kind of wood that's like, it's like something out of a kind of Swedish horror movie. It's all kind of conifers and sort of filtered light, and you can hear the kind of dripping sound of a robin calling, like in the distance. It's really quiet. And then we had this.
And me huffing and puffing in the undergrowth. Yeah.
And we went to this goss nest. It was amazing, and I remember vividly that day. So it's really interesting actually. In different parts of the country, in fact, a friend of mine sent me a picture from his house near Idaho of this nest and said, "What is it?" And I said, "This is a goshawk nest." And I said, "You have to be very careful going near it, because in America, goshawks are extremely territorial, and they, people will literally get like talon rakes in their heads and get knocked out by these birds trying to defend their nests." So I was like, "Be careful." And I think in Britain, they're quite variable, aren't they? You'll get birds, when you get to the nest, they'll disappear, and other birds that will be very present.
They're really, for me, in the 8 years I've done it, they're the polar opposite. They disappear. You very rarely see the adults. They might come and sit in a tree or circle above, but they don't attack.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you. Yeah, I mean, you really do have to wear a crash helmet if you're banding goshawks in America. But this bird, I remember this bird. There's a female. She was circling and she was calling, and there was something about watching this silhouette flickering across the pines, and it was like one of those really white skies, those sort of summer white skies, and it was like a dragon. It was just amazing. And then I watched you climb up a tree like it was a ladder. It was absolutely astonishing.
Not bad for a fat lad, I know. Yeah. It's what was it? Me and Robin, what we're like, I call Robin Yoda because he is when it comes to finding nests and understanding all about goshawks. And then I'm like, but then when we're both climbing, we're like Spider Pig, really.
Spider Pig. I recall that. Yeah. It was amazing.
So obviously then we went to the same nest, but a few years later, for the filming. So tell us a bit about that. Well,
this was really great. So like I got lots of approaches to do a documentary after the book came out, and lots of them were kind of like, we want you to reenact the, and I thought, I've already been through it once, I'm not bloody doing it again, And then I got this approach from some filmmakers, and there was something about the way they talked about it that seemed different. It was like quite a respectful. I mean, they wanted me to train another bird, but they said that what they'd really like to do is try and get across that delicate dance of training a goshawk for an audience to see what it's really like. Like it's like a wildlife documentary, and also maybe to see some wild birds. And I sort of thought, yes, these are the people. So and part of that involved. Going to this nest, and there's this amazing scene. It's really, I don't know if James Aldred talked about it because he was the cameraman on this, that Jimmy went up and we brought these birds down. It was one of those really dark summer days. And of course, as a cameraman, you're worried about light, and it's like the bottom of the sea at the bottom of this tree. And Jimmy's getting these birds out, and they're like, they look like sort of cotton wool with sort of like, I don't know, pangolin scales at this point with these huge sort of grey eyes, and they're hissing, and putting them on the ground. And there's this point where I said to James, you have to get this because we've got to get these back really quickly, and there's no second chances. And I could literally see sweat breaking out on his forehead. This is like a nightmare for a wildlife photographer. So we're like, we're looking at, we're trying to do these birds. And he came out, and he honestly, you remember, he was completely drenched, poor man. He was such a nice man. He was amazing. And he sat up the tree for, I don't know how many weeks it was, in this tiny, tiny little hide photographing these birds. He's an absolute god, isn't he really, James Aldred?
He is, yeah. He's a well. That was the first time I met him, and yeah, he's a legend. And we've had him on this, but his interviews back. Yeah, I need to make sure it's still on here. But yeah, he's a legend. But it was for me, it was brilliant. It was brilliant to show you the birds again and to go to the same nest. That's what I spent yesterday doing. It's late in the season now, and obviously, you know, the dreaded pandemic has knackered to see the monitoring up a bit this year. But I had to get a day's fix of goshawk, so I went out yesterday down to the Forest of Dean and did some wandering around. Didn't see many goshawks, but it doesn't matter. Just when you're in the goshawks amphitheatre, it doesn't really matter that you don't necessarily
feel the presence, isn't it? I always think, you know, there's a difference between being if you're in any environment where there's any kind of apex predator, the whole sort of tension is different in the way that the place works, and that goshawk woods are different from other woods. You can feel it. It's amazing. I'm being a bit woo woo here, but
it's true. That's one of the pulls of it for me anyway, definitely. So yeah, so and that was another success. You nailed that, and Mike Burkhead
that wasn't me. You know, that was the filmmakers. You know, I just sat there like a lemon training hawks and whistling.
but yeah, it was brilliant because, and I suppose the sort of proof in the pudding for this was Falcon has liked it, and they're probably one of the hardest bunches of people.
That was amazing. I never thought that would happen, because of course, you know, one of the things that happened in the 60s when the film Kes came out, the amazing Ken Loach movie based on the book by Barry Hines about this like amazing little kid, you know, in Barnsley, who's, you know, in a mining town, who has his kestrel. It's really tragic. You know, don't cry, maybe cry at the end. But anyway, he has his kestrel. It's like a little tender secret, and he flies his kestrel. And it was such a hit that in the 60s, a whole bunch of people went out after they saw it and just got kestrels. They took them from the wild, they bought them from pet shops, and there was a lot of terrible things that happened to these poor kestrels. People didn't know what they were doing. And of course, one of the things that happened after my book came out was that people started to go, oh, you know, it's going to start a bit of a craze for falconry again, Helen. This is going to be a disaster. But luckily, Jimmy, I clearly made falconry seem so miserable and depressing and difficult that it didn't happen. It's really good.
Well, yeah, if that's, yeah, that, okay, well, they won't use you for an advert, clearly, but yeah. No, it was.
That was a lovely film. It's a lovely film.
Yeah, the film was brilliant, and it was a pleasure to be part of it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I've got to ask you this question, because I've sometimes said this to people, and I don't know whether I'm actually talking out my bottom. Is it true that the film rights for H is for Hawk have they been snapped up? Is that something that's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the you know, COVID has really. I think they were going to film this summer, but of course, you know, COVID messed it up. So as far as I know, so yeah, I got this amazing email through my agent from the incredible Lena Headey, who played Queen Cersei in Game of Thrones and is amazing. And she read the book very early, before it even was a success, really. And she just said, I really want to play this. I really want to do this movie. This is, you know, this is it. And I spoke with her on the phone. I was terrified, and she was lovely, and she really got the book. And so she bought the rights. And then there was kind of a whole period where, you know, ins and outs. It takes a while to get a film going. And I met her, and you know, my friends are like, you know, she offers you wine, don't drink it, it'll be poison. The same person. And she's completely lovely. And you know, I decided really early on that I didn't want to get involved. I think, you know, once you've, you know, a book is like, again, it's a bit like, you know, you've made it, you've done your book, and now if someone else wants to have a go at telling the story, you don't want to get involved with that. You know, that's not fair on them, and it's not fair on you. And you know, I'm quite excited to see what it's like. So I think it was, yeah, again, I think it was going to be filming this summer, but I don't know what's happened because of COVID. I think a lot of productions have just stopped, so we'll see. But it's quite exciting.
Oh, so it is happening. That's I didn't expect you to say they were going to start filming in the summer. That's brilliant. That's
very cool. I mean, yeah, being played by, you know, Lena is pretty cool. It makes me feel very, wow. So it's very exciting.
Excellent.
And I don't know, you know, I mean, having interacted with her, she, I mean, Jimmy, you all know this. When you meet people, you can tell very quickly whether or not they can be a good falconer or not. And she's got that.
Yeah.
I think that quite actorly ability to really, really perceive what the hell is going on with another person, and she's going to be really, really good with the birds. So that's good.
Brilliant. That's what. Oh well, I mean, yeah. I can't wait for that to come out. That's brilliant. Your new book.
Yes.
Has that I can't remember now. Has it been released or was that put back?
I have the copy somewhere, shouldn't I? Hang on a second. I'm gonna just you can look at my new chair while I just go and get
Yeah, the Star Trek chair. Nice. Bring the parrot back.
Here we are. Found the copy. I've been sending them to people, so it's not out till August.
Right.
And it's called. It sounds like an American TV advert. It's called Vesper Flights, and you'll see there's a swift on the cover because swifts are amazing. And it's not like H's for Hawk. It's a collection of essays, and they range from everything from, it's a lot of birds. There are essays in here about deer collisions, about bird watching from the Empire State Building, about migraines, about mushroom hunting, all sorts of things. And there's even a funny story about my dad and a goat. So nice. I'm really, really pleased with it. And, it's quite exciting. So I hope if anyone reads it, I hope they like it.
Yeah, well, I look forward to getting a copy. So are they personal essays, stuff that you've done and experienced, or?
Yeah, I always think. I mean, some of them. A lot of them have appeared. Not a lot of them. Many of them appeared elsewhere. So a lot of them I've written a lot for the New York Times, for the New Statesman. I like writing personal essays. There's my parrot's tail.
That's all right.
And I think the reason I do that is that I think. There's a lot of nature writing that I love, but it works in this particular way. It's basically you go on a walk with a person, and as you go on the walk with the person in the book, they point out some nature and then they explain it to you. And this is fine, but I just think in the end that the power relation there is always that you don't know anything and they do, and they're telling you how lucky you are to learn about it. So one of the reasons I like about the personal essay is that it gives me the opportunity to not only get across the joy and the emotion that certain natural phenomenon provoke in me, but also to point out the things that go wrong, the things that when I get rained on and pissed off and I don't know what I'm doing and I can't identify things, and then when I don't know what things are, like what it's like to try and find out. And I think that I like to sort of think to myself that I'm sort of standing with the reader, finding stuff out with them rather than telling them how the world is, and that's kind of how I like to think about it. It's
brilliant. Well, I can't wait to read it. I've got someone's at the. Do you remember Gareth from the Raptor study, from Gloucester Raptor Study Group? Gareth Jones. Anyway,
I remember Gareth.
He's asked a question of how nervous were you doing this book following H is for Hawk.
Oh, the second album syndrome. Well, I mean, there are two ways of looking at it. One is like, oh my God, it's a disaster, it's terrifying. But the other way is to think, look, H for Hawk was such a bizarre and unpredictable and success. There's no way that what I write now can follow it in that way. Like, it's not possible. I can't write that book again.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's really, really freeing, because it means I don't have to panic about what I'm doing. I just do what I think is right and do what I think is, try and make something beautiful and interesting and generous. And it being a book of essays makes that slightly easier because it's not the same kind of book, right? It's not like a big story. The book after this is going to be a much bigger book, much more like H for Hawk, and it's going to be about Midway Atoll in the Pacific, and the US Navy and the end of the world and albatrosses. So that's going to be another cheerful one. It's going to be another big book about life and death and loss. And that's the one I think that I'm more nervous of, because that's going to have to be a really I've got to make that sing in a particular way, and that's quite yeah.
Is it as, I mean, because I'm not that creative a person, but is it, you saying about you've got to make it sing, is that as much that you've got to make it sing, you know what you want it to be and you know how you want to project it, but doing it and that's going to appeal to a lot of,
you never think of your audience as something you have to sell things to when you're writing. So the way I think about an audience when I'm writing is I think I'm writing to one person. It's not anyone real, but it's a person that is kind of like my ideal reader, and it might be you out there, people. And the singing thing is weird. So one of the things that it took me a while with H is for Hawk to realize, and I started writing it and I didn't put much about myself in, I put mostly about Hawks in, and it didn't work. I kept kind of brick wall, you know, I couldn't get any further. And then I realized that I had to be absolutely, you know, devastatingly honest about the shit I was going through too. And I realized that readers can really tell when you're not telling them everything, or when you're holding back, or you're sort of dissembling, or being a bit kind of cagey about something, and they don't like it. And you can see that in any book you read. You can see if the author, I mean, obviously non-fiction, but you can see if the author's being really, really straight with you. And I think to make a book sing, you have to get to the place where you are vulnerable enough to do that. I mean, I know it sounds really Californian, but you have to be vulnerable. You have to let the audience see who you really are. And that's a bit scary. Yeah, but that's how books sing.
Yeah, well, and yours, well, H is for Hawk song. It belted it. Albatrosses.
Yes.
Interesting you should make that, mention that, talking about birds. It doesn't have to just be raptors. I happen to know, following you on social media and one thing or another, you've got a soft spot for an albatross or two.
I do.
Tell us a bit about what you've done with albatrosses.
667,000 pairs winter before last. So yeah, albatrosses are amazing. They are amazing. That's just, you know, it's just a fact. So not this last December, the December before, I spent a few weeks on Midway Atoll in the Pacific Ocean, which is this sort of 2 square mile island, which has got the ruins of a kind of a US naval air station on it. They left in '93, and also about 2 million birds. So It's astonishing. You know, it's like the end of the world. You go there and it's just, you know, every 3 foot there's a blazing albatross or a black-footed albatross. I'll see if I can show everyone. I've got some pictures on here. So I went there as part of an albatross counting team, as a volunteer for the US Fish and Wildlife Service. And we spent these weeks literally walking up and down in lines with, like, you know, those little counters?
Yeah.
Counting albatrosses. And we counted 667,000 albatrosses. And it was amazing. It's such a great place. It was just the most incredible place ever. I got really sick when I was out there. I developed thyroid toxicosis from an autoimmune disorder I didn't know I had. And I got a goiter, which is like a horrible swollen thyroid. And I had to come home, which was really sucky. I didn't want to come home. I said to the guy there, I don't want to go home. You know, I want to stay here. And he said, if you don't go home, you might die. And I'm like, all right, I'll go home. so I came home.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, fair enough. So I'm sorry about this. It's very rude, I know, but I just want to find a picture to get people to see. Maybe you can see what it was like to be on the island. It was an incredible place. So I was meant to be there this summer. I was meant to be there right now. And what I was meant to be doing was assisting with the mouse eradication, because the island is full of albatrosses, and underneath the albatrosses are bone-in petrels, which are little tiny sort of nocturnal but seabirds. And the albatrosses, there's mice on the island. They're eating the incubating birds. They need to be exterminated. It's kind of grim if you're a mouse, but they were never meant to be there. They came in with with people. So they were going to, you know, the albatrosses are gone. They're going to catch up a lot of the other birds and put them in aviaries while they baited and killed all the mice. And I was meant to be there helping with these captive birds. And obviously I didn't get to go because of COVID. So hopefully next year. So I'm going to just show people what it was like on Midway. So this is like an average picture of Midway Island. I don't know if you can see that.
Wow.
There is some albatrosses.
As far as the eye can see.
As far as I can see, and then some. And we counted all of them. And it's really interesting, you know, those birds, that we walk past them and some of them are quite snappy. I've got a few kind of albatross scars on my legs, you know, quite understandably, they're incubating. And some of them seem to be so touch-starved that if you sit near them, they will actually put their heads down so you can scritch them. And when it rains, they all, because they're incubating, obviously they're not moving for like ages. when it rains, they all put the beaks up to the air and they drink the rain as it comes down. It was just the most incredible place. So that's where I hopefully get back next year, hopefully, for that.
Brilliant. And that's the heart of the next book, the third book. Yeah. That's really, really exciting. And then I suppose you don't look much further than that at the moment. There's no urge.
Where the world is at the moment, Jimmy. I don't know if I can look forward past next week, to be honest. But that's true. At the moment that's where I am. But I mean, I think my deepest subject is it's love, right? It's love for this glittering profusion of non-human life around us. I think one of the great mistakes that we all make is just assuming that the world is here for just us, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. No. Well, I want to show you something, and you do have these moments, don't you? When you're some more than others, when you're out with the natural world, and I don't want to get all, because I'm not very good at getting. No,
you should totally go full Chris Packham.
Well, I was out checking a goshawk site yesterday in the forest and came across a kill, which was very obviously a jay. And when I picked one of those, I haven't got them here. I got told off. I put them in the shed because I had a skull and an owl pellet and some goshawk feathers. I've got a goshawk feather up there that I found. But I found, obviously, part of the remains of the jay was the blue feather off the wing. And it was just the most spectacular thing. Just what that one feather that I picked up, and it blew my mind.
No, it's true, Jimmy. Those little blue feathers on the coverts of the wings there, they are like, I mean, I look, when I find them, it's like, I'm not even overstating this. It's like finding a sapphire or a gem. It's like, it's so beautiful.
It was, and I gathered a couple of them up and put them in my pocket, and and they'll go in. It's weird, isn't it? But they'll go in a cupboard. I won't throw them away. They'll stay with me. And I was talking to a friend about it today, and then he said to me, he goes, "Wait till you find a kingfisher. If you ever get have a kingfisher in your hand with the iridescence and the blue of it, it's." But these few feathers were stunning. What a wonderful thing,
Well, that's really lovely.
There you go.
And I love how I love how gothic it is too. Like, I found these dead bird feathers.
That's it. And then when I found the skull, I was like, yes, that's going home with me. That's going in the shelf. That's going on the shelf.
Guillemot skull on the windowsill. I'm a naturalist. We're just a bunch of weirdos. Yeah. So but luckily the one thing I did do, got the pellet out of my pocket, because I've done that before. Put an owl pellet in my pocket and it's disintegrated, and then you've gone to get change out your pocket to pay for the tips for a waiter, and you've just got rodent remains, grey dust with these kind of like bones, sort of. It's like you're something out of a horrifying science fiction.
Just leave that for a tip in Frankie and Benny's. There you go. Anyway, that was so that's in the cupboard as well. It is macabre, but then that's nature, isn't it?
That's the way it goes.
That's life and death. Oh well, it's been, Helen, it's been an absolute treat having you on. I don't speak to you enough, really.
We should chat more. We should just chat more. It's been too long. And it's
I know. Well, what I'm hoping to do, obviously, I have advertised it. This is the last week, so I've got you, and then hopefully my good friend Steve Roberts, who's nest finder extraordinaire and been all over the world and does all the nest finding for Spring Watch and stuff like that. So he's on hopefully this week, and then I've got a special guest. I've got a surprise for next week to finish. And what I'm going to do is I'm hopefully going to do this monthly with different people, because like James Aldred, most people have never heard of James Aldred, and they loved him. The people that caught it loved it. So when the new book is out, I'll aim to get you back on. We'll have you back on.
Infinite silly stories to tell, Jimmy. I can talk for. It's been such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you inviting me on. And it's goodbye everyone. I'm sorry I can't see everyone's faces, but it's been really nice talking to you for once. So
no, it's all right. Right, goodbye everyone on Facebook. We're gonna love you and leave you. And thanks, Helen.